Hashtag literally a capitalist. In this video, I'm going to be discussing basically how I see myself and identify as literally a capitalist. And I've pretty much been a capitalist since I'm about 18 years old. And I wanted to share the story of how that came about in line with the new campaign that's being pushed out by Turning Point UK. Now, I don't know very much about this organization, but they seem to be pushing a very capitalist, individualist, equal opportunity message, of which all of that I support. But it's early days for them. But nonetheless, I wanted to share my story and basically how it is I came about being a capitalist. And I was pretty much the only capitalist amongst my peers growing up. And I would get into numerous conversations as pretty much the only individualist amongst my friends. And we pretty much didn't agree on very much. But I mean, back in those days, you can have disagreements with people and still remain very close friends with them, unlike kind of the environment today. But nonetheless, I, very much raised like a middle-class household. I went to a private school. It was very much based on a Canadian type of education system. It was geared towards passing the examinations in my home country of Trinidad and Tobago. But nonetheless, all of the textbooks were from Canada. The syllabus and the teaching style was Canadian. And I don't know where I picked it up, but I definitely had this anti-American sentiment while I was growing up. I really didn't know why. Even to this day, I don't know where it came from in that regard. When I was much younger, and one of my childhood friends and myself, we used to be in the pool, and we'd be kind of roughhousing and romping around. And I'd call myself a Canadian kickboxer, based off of the movie franchise with like Jean-Claude Van Damme and these other people, American kickboxer. But I didn't want to be called an American for some reason. So I mean that was a very strange time, and I honestly don't know where that mindset came from. It must have been through the education system somehow, very subtly. I just had this, both me and my most of my childhood friends just had this anti-American slant, and I can't explain it. But all of that really changed when I actually went to the US. I went to the US back shortly after 1998. I went to Irvine, California to do some studying in online trading. And I was reading at that time the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And for the first time, I was seeing the presentations of how to understand wealth, how to understand money, how money was made, as well as understanding for the first time the definition of capitalism, which was, the voluntary free exchange between individuals under the rule of law. Basically, that's what it came down to, the freedom to be able to, trade with whomever you wanted, within the confines of the law and protected by contract law. That's basically what it came down to. And, he highlighted one of the capitalist heroes. This is Robert Kiyosaki. At that time, he looked up to Henry Ford, which was an amazing story of innovation and the building of the Model T and the development of the V6 engine at that time. And, all of these types of things. So once I understood what capitalism was, I realized, yeah, this definitely appeals to me. Now, I didn't have much understanding of socialism. I just knew that I wasn't a statist. I didn't really think that the government was going to solve any kind of problems. Now, I was very young. I was 18. My whole worldview was beginning to shift. And the more I got involved in business development, and I started writing business plans and marketing plans for myself, as well as for some of the clients that I had, the more and more I began to understand the principles of like economics, business and contract law, as well as government regulations and taxation and all these other types of things. And I used to have this fabulous friend of mine. She used to work in some government department. She was a couple of years older than me, but we'd meet quite regularly. And she was definitely not a capitalist. In fact, the fact that I was a capitalist was, kind of a mark of shame in her eyes. But nonetheless, we were very good friends. Me and her sister got along really well as well, but that's a whole other story. But we would have these disagreements about, all of pretty much the same arguments that people are having today about taxation, about, taxing the rich, about the need for regulation and, evil corporations and all that good stuff. And I would defend my positions. Now, I didn't always have full arguments, but it definitely challenged me to think about what it is that I was saying. And yeah, all throughout my 20s and so forth, I really started to do studying on this subject. As I said, I got involved in reading like The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek. Started reading some of the works by Ludwig von Mises. I got involved with the Mises Institute. I started to explore the different variations of socialism, so from Trotskyism, Leninism, Maoism, Titoism, just, a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm by no means an expert on any of this, but I definitely got the broad strokes. I struggled through the Communist Manifesto. Honestly, I never finished it. But yeah, I definitely tried to have a good understanding of why it is I believed in, individuality, individual human rights, equal opportunity for all, limited government, the purposes of contract law and all these other things. And I less and less saw government as the solution, and more it was the problem. And I remember having a discussion with somebody about why civilizations end. I think there have been a couple books on this subject, especially pertaining to the Roman Empire. And most civilizations end either by famine or some kind of natural disaster, sometimes plague or whatever the case might be, conquest, and internal political implosion, right? And 2 out of 3 of those is pretty much government-led, right? So 2 out of 3 are basically operations by the state. So I began to understand that the state has been responsible for, more deaths throughout history than the individual per se. Even the most detestable characters in history, they could not accomplish the mass destruction that they had they not been able to wield the power of the state. And the power of the state is tremendous. It's the biggest money pot as well as the biggest gun or source of force in any society. And this naivete of many people to believe that only the nicest, most benevolent people are going to wield this power, and it's not going to fall into the hands of deviant, sociopathic narcissists and others who are going to try and use this power to their own ends, I think is the great downfall of modern politics. It's not a bunch of saints, that are running the states, and it's people who are attracted to power and influence and all this other thing. And those do not tend to be like Mother Teresa types. So, but yeah, so that's kind of, where I came from with that. As anybody knows, I've done a number of videos on this subject, on capitalism, on socialism. I haven't done a video on communism. I might kind of touch on that, but I mean, it's easy to define. It's basically where socialism is the collective means of production, usually by the workers. Communism is the collective ownership of the means of production by the society. So everybody, not just the workers, but everybody, owns a part of it. That's the big difference between communism and socialism. But yeah, and coming out here to the UK, it has become more and more evident that people definitely, they don't even understand what socialism is. They're all socialist. Well, a lot of them are. And they don't even know what the term means. They think it basically means any government program is socialist, and that's clearly not the definition. And at the same time, they have no idea what capitalism is. And many times when I challenge them, like, well, what do you mean by capitalism? They say, well, it means doing things for profit, or it means pursuing money at all cost. And while that might be true, that might be a side effect to excessive capitalism, it definitely can happen, because greed is a human trait. It's not limited to capitalism, just like in the USSR and the Soviet Empire. It's not to say that the leading class, the leaders did not get greedy, and while most of the country may have been living in some form of abject poverty, the leadership definitely wasn't, right? Anyway, I don't mean to digress into that. But with that said, yeah, I'm definitely, a proud capitalist. I believe it is the best way to bring about equality. It's the best way to bring about, wealth, and to raise people out of poverty, simply because it doesn't care what you look like, what your beliefs are, what religion you are, what sexual orientation you are. Capitalism doesn't care about any of those things. It's entirely a meritocracy, what can you produce that is of value for others? Not necessarily value for yourself, but value for others. And that is the cornerstone of a capitalist society. You only get wealthy by serving other people. Now, yes, there are unscrupulous people who steal and manipulate and con people out of money, but that's not true capitalism. And that definitely is not limited in a capitalist environment. It happens in government, it happens in socialism, it happens under communism, because of the advent of power, usually from some kind of centralized authority. So, but in terms of giving people the opportunity to pursue their own goals, their own desires, their own dreams, I believe individuals have the best information on how they want to live their lives, spend their money, and do the things that they want to do. And as a result of that, I am definitely, literally, a capitalist. So yeah, guys, that's my story on how I ventured into capitalism. And, you can check any of my social media. I have that moniker displayed very proudly on pretty much all of my social media. So I'm not shying away from that in any kind of capacity. So with that said, guys, thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more, please be sure to subscribe, hit the notification button so you know whenever a new video is put out. Be sure to comment below. If you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. We could always have the conversation in the comments below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Take care.